Hello and welcome to my channel. It's Astro Gyro here, and I hope you are all doing very well today. And if you are, let's get started. If you're not, I hope that you will be. I hope that you will get yourself in a comfortable position, grab your coffee, your tea, your drink, your snack, plug in your headsets and go for that jog or that walk in the park, because this is a podcast, style of kind of channel. So you don't have to be looking at the screen the whole time. You can kind of multitask and do other things, while this plays in the background. That's the whole idea behind it. So yeah, whatever you need to get comfortable and ready. And so yeah, before we get started, also just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of you for the support. Thank you for liking, for commenting, for sharing, for the subscriptions. Yeah, it really, really means a lot. It definitely shows that there is interest, and it shows that this is content that you guys want to see more of. So thank you so much. There's already some stuff that I have posted on the channel. I've talked about elemental signs. I've talked about qualities like cardinals, fixed and mutable signs. I've also talked about decans in astrology, what those are, um, and how everything sort of is interconnected, planetary wise and energy wise and so forth. So be sure to check those out if you haven't already. Um, yeah, so let's get started. In this particular segment, I'm going to be focusing on major aspects in astrology. Um, and basically, the way I understand aspects in astrology, because there are minor aspects and there are major aspects as well. So I might do a video as well on minor aspects if you guys want to also learn about those. Um, but talking about major aspects, the types if recognized are conjunctions, and those are usually between 0 to 10 degrees um, at an angle of 0 to 10 degrees, and then followed by sextiles, which are usually at about 60-degree angles on the wheel. So now we're talking about the natal chart, that 360-degree wheel. So when you have a conjunction, it's usually like 0 to 10, it's at a 0 to 10 degree angle, and then a sextile is like at a 60-degree angle, and then a square is usually at a 90-degree angle, and then it's followed by a trine that's at a 120 uh, degree angle, and then an opposition is like, 180-degree angle um, on the little wheel natal chart. Also, people call it the birth chart. And yeah, the way that I understand it is just literally it's like a wheel. It's like, spinning. It's like throwing in some dice in there or some numbers in there, and you just spin the wheel and you just kind of see what comes out. It might actually have something to do with your past life, maybe you lived a certain type of past life that has resulted in you getting some certain types of oppositions and certain types of trines and sextiles and um, conjunctions and oppositions that affect you differently in this lifetime. And so maybe there's a life lesson that you have to learn, um, regarding a certain area of your life, be it work, be it relationship, or just other aspects of your life, And then it could also be like if you have a sextile, then you might reap, benefits of that sextile in whatever, again, whatever area of your life that is. So you might have a really good, work situation or work life in general that generally functions well, and you might have had success and just a lot of benefit, and just things go quite, in a stable manner and in harmony. But then in relationships, you might find that you're struggling a little bit and you just don't know why. Um, And so major aspects actually help to explain that. But to fully understand it, also, you would have to do a birth chart. I also do those. You would have to do birth charts, and then we get to look at how all the planets kind of played out and at what angle they are, to each other. But as I was saying, of course, that's what the aspects are all about. It's just about how the planets are playing out and what effect that has on whatever element, um, or whatever aspect, sorry, of your life it has an influence on. And also, usually you'll see that the way that these major aspects influence your life depends on where the energy falls in terms of the sign, and also where the energy falls in terms of the house. If you look at the natal chart or the wheel, you will see that all of these planets correspond to a particular sign. Um, and they also correspond to a particular house. And some people, when you look at some people's charts, or even if you look at your own chart, you will see that in a particular house, you will have a cluster of planets in a particular house. Maybe you would have Mars and Jupiter in your third house under the sign of Sagittarius, for example, Um, so basically, it means that Mars and that, Mars and Jupiter um, fell in the energy of Cancer. So they are functioning in the energy of Cancer in the third house, and so that's what creates this kind of oppositions and this kind of trines and sextiles, these kind of aspects. There's a way that, like, does Jupiter function well in the third house, and what does having Mars in the third house also do to the third house alongside Jupiter, and how do these planets play out in the energy of Sagittarius, where they kind of also fell in. So these are all kind of how this is what it means when people talk about major aspects in astrology. It's basically how the angles and the degrees to which those planets have fell or were determined at the time of birth on your natal chart. So the first is usually conjunctions, um, and those are usually at 0 to 10 degrees. At a 0 to 10 degree angles on the 360 wheel. And conjunctions basically are just like two or more planets occupying the same house. Um, um, and then it becomes a question of, like, how do those two planets behave? So that was just what I was now talking earlier about. If you have Mars and Jupiter in the third house, um, are they in harmony to each other? Do they support the functions of the third house, or are they at conflict with each other? So it might be that Jupiter might be in harmony with the third house, also depending which sign it falls in, because that's the energy that then they function. So it becomes a thing of, like, okay, maybe Jupiter functions well in the third house, but Mars maybe doesn't do so well in the third house. Usually Mars is a little bit tricky in the third house, to be quite honest, because because the third house is the house of communication and family and siblings and so forth. So Mars is quite active there. So it can make the person really talkative and very restless, really quick with their words or really quick with their actions without maybe thinking so carefully about their action. Um, and if you have Jupiter there, which is like really lucky, go lucky type of sign, they might be at conflict with each other. That, like, maybe this person wants to say something nice or wants to be in this happy, go lucky, jovial mood, but then Mars is always challenging this fiery, intense energy to come out. So there's always a conflict that people will be like, oh, this person appears nice, and then to some people, they might say, no, this person is so aggressive, and they always say really nasty, bad things when they're angry or whatever. That could be like the Mars influence. So you see, that's what I mean, that, like, when Mars and Jupiter, they're in conjunctions to each other in the third house. So they're that's the influence that they would then have with each other. But then, um, some conjunctions could also be positive. For example, if you have in the third house, because the third house is ruled by Mercury, so if you have Mercury there, and then you have another sign that functions well with Mercury, I think Jupiter probably functions well with Mercury, might function quite well there as well. So that might be like a positive conjunction where the happy-go-lucky, adventurous side of Jupiter, in the third house, because the third house is also the house of education, not like tertiary education, but like elementary education. So it brings Jupiter might bring this kind of might bring ideas and just help the native be really good with the elementary education and just be kind of a lucky, jovial type of person in their third house activities. And then Mercury, because it's in its own rulership, it's in its own house. It's a house of comfort, and it's helped by Jupiter. That's a positive conjunction because they are feeding off of each other. Jupiter is feeding off of Mercury's energy positively, and Mercury is also feeding off of Jupiter's energy, positively. So that's like a positive conjunction. But that's essentially what it means when you have, you know, um, conjunctions. It's basically two or more planets occupying the same house, and it can be either positive or negative depending on the energies that the planets bring to that particular house. By the way, I will actually be making, I think the next recordings that I'm going to be doing will be about the houses, either the houses or the planets. Um, so I'll be talking about what each house entails, which planets rule which houses and what that means. And I'll also be later on doing specific videos on just the planets themselves as well. But I digress, and so let's get back to the major aspects because that's what this video or this recording is about. So that's what conjunctions are, and that's the first of the major aspects, and it happens, like I was saying, at 0 to 10-degree angles on the 360 wheel. And then followed by that, um, so again, yeah, conjunctions can be positive or negative. It really just depends. And then the next one that follows is the sextiles. Sextiles are kind of similar to trines because the sextiles are generally positive and they're really similar to trines because the sextile is at 60 degrees angle and the trine is at 120-degree angle, and 60 plus 60 is 120. So it's almost like the sextile and trines are opposite of each other, and they generally are positive vibrations. They're generally easier positive vibrations. So if you have planets that are sextiling each other, that's usually quite favorable energy. It's usually quite good energy. Same applies also if you have trine. The trine is just a little bit more powerful because it's at a 120-degree angle, but it's also generally a beneficial energy. Um, yeah, but then when we go into the sextile, yeah, like I was saying, it's usually quite easier energy. It's um, the planets are sort of like in harmony with each other, and they tend to yield. It's not as challenging as having an opposition, for example, or a square. Usually at 60-degree angles, if you put in some effort and you work really hard, to attain the benefit, like the full benefit of that planet, um, it can work really, really well. So it's like really easy energy usually. Um, and the conjunctions are generally not as, conflicted. Um, and it's just very responsive. It's just very responsive, and if you have like a sextile in your dating life or in your relationship life, if you have like a sextile, if you have like sextiling planets, then you might find that like you put very little effort in your relationships and they work really well. And then other people, maybe who have an opposition, have to work extra hard, to um, for relationships for them to work, you know? And it could be something like a sextile could be something like maybe like your moon is not, maybe your moon is like sextiling your Venus. If your moon is sextiling your Venus, it means that because Venus is what we are attracted to. Venus talks about attraction. So if Venus and the moon are sextiling each other, um, it means that what you are attracted to also has the potential to give you emotional stability or emotional security or emotional fulfillment, because the moon is that emotional security, it's that emotional stability. So you would find that if you are attracted to somebody through their Venus energy, and then that sextiles your moon energy, then you would have a perfect relationship where your emotional needs are met, um, as well as your sexual attraction, your sexual physical attraction, which is through Venus. you know. Um, so that's like an example of like a sextile, of like a sextile situation that works well, and usually sextiles work well. It's an easy conjunction or easier energy. Um, and the trine is kind of similar also, um, where it's at 120 degree. Um, and sometimes also a trine could involve like three planets where you have, maybe, once again using the same example, maybe Venus uh, and Mars and your moon are trining each other. You would find then what you're attracted, when we're talking about relationships, you would find, for example, that what you're attracted to um, physically, plus what your emotional needs, the moon, and also your willpower, your sex drive and your willpower are in alignment, Mars. So that's like a trine, and that's like, but that's like a really good situation. So you not only are you physically attracted to somebody, but you also have really good sex with this person through their Mars and through the Mars energy, because it's trining the Venus. But then also you get a good emotional fulfillment or security from this person, which is the Moon trine. So when you have that, like a trine, like where you have the Venus and the Moon and Mars trining each other, that's like almost perfect. Like you would have almost a perfect relationship. But not everybody gets that lucky. Sometimes you only have a sextile where you have the Venus and Moon sextiling each other, but not the Mars. So this person has the potential for emotional fulfillment, and there is a physical attraction through Venus, but then maybe the Mars is opposing each other. So sex is not as fun, or sex is somehow a challenge in some way or another that forces you to step out of your comfort zone, or um, that just forces you to adapt in some way or another, or sometimes it just doesn't work. And that's why you would find, you meet somebody and you're like, this person is so attractive, and you talk to them and you hear them talk, and you're like, when they talk to me, I just feel so emotionally fulfilled, but I just feel like there is no fire. See, that's the Mars. That's what we're talking about. So there's something about the Mars that's either it's squaring you or it's opposing you, you know? But if it's a trine where the Mars and the Venus and the Moon are trining each other, then it's like a triple jackpot, where there is incredible chemistry, there is incredible emotional receptivity and connection, but there's also quite great physical attraction as well. So that's kind of like how a trine situation works, and that's usually the 100 and 20 degrees. So a trine is really powerful. It's actually probably one of the more stronger vibrations. It's quite beneficial. And these are things, like I was saying, that just comes innately. Like some people are just lucky in relationships or lucky in love because they have these trines, or other people are lucky in business, because they have these trines. Other people may be good communicators because maybe Mercury is trining their Mars and their Jupiter, so they have luck, and then they have this strong willpower to carry out stuff, and they have Mercury trining, so they're also good communicators, so they can market their ideas. So it depends where the trine falls. Does it fall in your area of work? Does it fall in your area of education? Does it fall in your love life? So yeah, so if you have a trine, you're pretty lucky in your natal chart. But some people have more oppositions than they have trines, and other people have squares than they have trines. Some people have sextiles. Um, we already talked about the sextile and we talked about the trine. A square happens so the square and oppositions are the most difficult, very powerful energies, very, very powerful, but very, very hard and strong energies to handle. Um, Usually, squares really, really force us to step out of our comfort zone, and squares usually are at 90-degree angles of each other. Um, and these are things that because a square is like it's not yeah it's just it's something that a square is like the way a square works is that it's like the example I was just talking now that for example maybe you meet somebody and their Mars and your Mars are squaring each other, so there's something about that person that triggers you the wrong way, or there's something about that person that just they might be attracted to this person because of their Venus. The Venus might be there might be some sextile there or some in but then you realize that there's something about Mars, the drive or the sex energy or the willpower that's just something they do, their action that just rubs you the wrong way, that just irritates you and you just can't put your hand what it is, but at the same time you're still so drawn to them, you know? So that's what the square is. It's like it forces you to learn. It's like seeing, I almost want to say like seeing a mirror of yourself, but then maybe that would be more opposition. But although they are almost similar energies, um, so a square is usually an energy that's very uncomfortable. It takes years for some people to kind of master that. It's also how some people come out of really bad relationships because, like I was saying, you're drawn to this particular person, but you're drawn to this person, of course, because there are other elements in your charts that draw you to this person, be it the moon, be it the sun, be it the Venus. But then there's something that opposes. There's a planet, a strong planet that opposes your energy, and so you guys then oppose each other in some way or another. It could be communication, it could be just something about work, or just some routines at home that you guys don't agree upon because they have a way of doing it and you have a way of doing it, and you're just like, oh, it just gets on my nerve when they do that. But then this thing challenges you and it challenges you, and at the end of the day you realize that, what did I learn from this person? What did I learn out of this situation? you know um and how did they learn from this? Did they learn anything from this? And so when you go into a different situation, like if you would then go into a different relationship, then it would be like, so now I'm not gonna, this is what I learned from the past relationship. So if you attract that kind of energy again, you know you would be in a better position to handle it differently or better. So that's what oppositions are. They're usually very challenging, and even at an individual level, when they don't have anything to do with other people, sometimes it could just be also like an individual thing where maybe your Mars is squares your Mercury, or yeah, squares your Mercury. So it's like then you're like your will to communicate and your willpower might be at conflict. So you might be somebody who wants to say something, but then you're always holding back, or you might be somebody who wants to do something, but then you're always holding back because if your Mars, for example, is in a weak sign, like maybe in Cancer, you might be more shy, or you might not have a very strong will to express your energy or to express your idea because Mars doesn't do so well in Cancer. If it's in the fourth house, in the sign of Cancer, for example, that's really bad for Mars. But then you might have like it might, square Mercury in some way where Mercury is like really strong, but then it's in conflict where there's a side of you that wants to express your ideas, that wants to talk, that wants to communicate, that wants to, you know, be expressive, Um, Yet at the same time, there's this pain, this fear, this anxiety, where you're like, but I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if, because, it's squaring your Mars, And so life, you know, getting the benefit of the square becomes like something that takes years for some people. It becomes like a life path, a life journey, self work, self discovery, where you kind of figure out how to balance and work with these, very strong energies. How do you overcome your shyness, or how do you make, you know, how do you overcome your shyness and still be able to, to communicate and share your ideas, and if you're shy or whatever. So that's kind of like what the square is, and it's an energy, because I was saying it's a very powerful energy. It's something you also can't avoid. It always, and it's like I was gonna say it always annoys you. Maybe it does, but it always what's the word I'm looking for? It's like an urge. There's always an urge. You're always feeling like you're at conflict with yourself, where you wanna maybe give up on something, or you just feel like, I just can't do this. I just can't do this. But then there's another side of you that's like, but you have to do it. You have to do it. It's uncomfortable, but you just have to go for it. Just do it. So that's what Squares does. And once you get to that level, or you're able to kind of work with those two energies that are squaring each other, it's very powerful, it's very beneficial, and you can gain its benefits, once you step out of your comfort zone. And that's what squares are. And it's very similar to the last aspect, which is oppositions. And oppositions are at 180 degrees, or 180 degrees angle on the 360 wheel. And they're really similar to squares, honestly. It's Oppositions kind of function as dichotomy, as dichotomies to each other. So it signifies, relationships or situations that are either, oppositional to each other, or that are, you know, complementary, to each other. But this is a little bit different from conjunctions. It doesn't necessarily have to be within the same house. It's opposing. It's like, at an angle to each other. And so, of course, this is difficult, because it's like, when you talk about dichotomy, you're talking about two things, kind of. So, yeah, there might be situations where you're kind of like at odd with yourself, or with a particular situation that, like, um, it could also be the way that you're seen, that, like, the way you see yourself sometimes is not the way that other people see you, you know? If it's, if this opposition has to do with your ascendants, and, your first house, for example, the way that you are, if it's your if it's opposing your ascendants, or your first house, and your, let's say, your seventh house, the house of other people, the house of relationships, the house of commitments and partnerships and stuff. If there's an opposition between the seventh house and the first house, those planets there, then maybe the way you see yourself is not the way that other people see you. And so through this opposition, you might be attracting people that mirror something that's very uncomfortable, that you don't want to see, that you don't want to face about yourself. Um, that kind of helps you grow, because you're like, oh, but why do people treat me this way? I feel like I'm a good person, or I have done nothing but just be kind and giving to people, but I'm always getting the, short end of the stick, consistently. What am I doing wrong? Like, why am I having such terrible karma? You know? But it could be that there's some opposition with your ascendants, or your first house and the seventh house. The way you see yourself is not the way that other people see you. But sometimes also it could be complementary, in that, if it opposes, if planets are well aspected, it could be a good, it could also be a good, opposition, although usually it's more on the negative, because squares and oppositions are more stronger in negative. Um, yeah, vibrations. So, yeah, I think this is already almost 30 minutes. It's getting too long now. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Just gonna quickly run it down again. I was talking about aspects in astrology. I talked about conjunctions, which are from 0 to 10-degree angles on the 360 wheel, and then you have the sextiles, which are 60-degree angles, and then squares 90-degree angles, trines 120-degree angles, and oppositions at 180-degree angles on the 360 wheel. And basically, conjunctions are two or more planets that either work in harmony or against each other in a house, same house. And then sextiles are when planets are kind of at 60-degree angles of each other, and usually it's an easier energy, same as a trine energy as well. So sextiles and trines tend to be more favorable energies, and squares and oppositions tend to be a little bit more difficult. They require more effort, more self-awareness, self-learning, and so forth. And the whole reason why I wanted to bring light to aspects, um, particular major aspects, because this is what this audio is about. Um, but nonetheless, I wanted to bring light to aspects as far as astrology is concerned, because these are important. They help us understand the kind of dynamics that come into play in our relationships, in our work, situations, in our individuality, why you may have luck in work but not in relationship, or why you may do so well in education but not so well in work or relationships. Things of that nature all have to do with how different energies play out. And of course, these energies are brought by the planets, and in which house they fall in, and in which sign they correspond with. So that is the significance of aspects in astrology. I hope that you guys found this, informative. I hope you learned something new. And if not, if you already are aware of this, I hope you heard or found a perspective that was maybe a little bit different from your own. Yeah, so I'll be coming up with more content. I think that, like I was saying, in the next recordings, I'll be doing planets or houses. So yeah, I think that's it for now. I just want to say thank you once again. I really appreciate that you guys took time to listen to this audio recording. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing this, and for commenting. And be sure to check out some of the other stuff that I've also posted on my channel regarding astrology. And yeah, with that said, yeah, wishing you all a good day, and see you in the next recording.